Okay. Wait just a second and see if that is Roger.
It is. Do you hear me?
We do.
Okay.
So we are just getting started, so I'll call the meeting to order. The first thing we were going to do was to review the public comments that were submitted and see if there is anything we need to address that we haven't addressed or want to revisit that we have addressed. And I spent a little bit of time today looking at some of the comments that came in from the public, as well as the stuff that was submitted by staff and the council and some other folks. So what I came up with is a list of issues we might want to at least mention from the public. Was one member of the public indicated that the council should identify liaisons to other organizations, arts and culture organizations and other groups that the city is closely related with. And that's certainly something that has some merit to it. I don't know if it's something we should or want to put in the charter, but I think that's something that the council might want to discuss. So I could certainly include that in our report as a public comment. Part of my theory is all the public comment we will include as the final report. There was an emphasis from another person on trying to find ways to increase the nonpartisan nature of local government. The only place that that's listed is in the election section, which indicates that people are to run on a nonpartisan basis. I think there's some concern that too much partisanship is getting into local government. I think all of us have seen some of that over the years. It certainly has changed a lot in time I've been in local government. I don't know if there's any way to address that in any more detail than we did. We could potentially put something into the preamble we're talking about to emphasize the nonpartisan nature of elected office. So that might be one suggestion I could make, but I don't know that there's any other way that we can put barriers up against partisanship getting introduced into local government. Linda.
I just want to ask a question. As you're going through these comments, would you like us to comment on them now, or do you want us to go through them first and do in each one after?
Why don't you comment on them now so that we don't miss anything?
Okay, so can we go back to the first one again then? Because I do think
Yep.
we should talk about that first.
Okay, that was the idea of having council designate liaisons to other organizations. And I think that was primarily focused on members of the council being delegated that different tasks.
So I would personally, I don't know that we need to put specific language in the charter around that, though I do agree that that would be something that I think the council should be more than willing to publicize on a regular basis as to where each person is serving and what different liaisons are out there for the different committees and boards. But I think that that's something that should come from the council, not from written language in the charter.
I agree.
Anybody, Patty?
Yes, as far as partisanship goes, I think, first of all, I don't think there's a need for the preamble. I think we're kind of introducing wokeisms into our Lewiston charter here, and I don't think we need to keep up with the rest of the world, whether it's Portland or the National Civic League. And I'd like to see us actually strike language saying gender identity and gender expression. I mean, we already have. Whoops. I don't know what's going on there.
Everybody. Okay. Nope,
Still
sorry.
doing it? Okay, I'm here. All right. That's scary. Huh.
Patty, could you try signing off and signing back on?
Yeah, see, I bring up something controversial. Look at that. Let me leave.
Weird.
Are we better now?
Yeah.
Okay, Patty, why don't you go continue?
Well, I'm not on right now. Hold on.
We see you.
Oh, we see you.
Oh, okay. So
We hear
let
you
me
too. We hear you.
let me repeat. I think introducing these terms of gender expression and gender identity is not necessary for our Lewiston City Charter. When you talk about partisanship, I think that's a very left-leaning language, and we already do say gender in there. In regards to whether, again, I don't think there's necessary to have a preamble. It's a Lewiston City Charter. It's how we run our city. I don't think we have to get into all those terms at the beginning of that. And same with section 8.5 on prohibitions. Again, I think we can eliminate gender identity or expression. Again, we say gender. I just don't think we need to introduce these terms to our Lewiston City Charter.
Other comments?
Personally, I'd like to keep the preamble in there, and I'm very much in favor of it. I can understand the repetitiveness of the gender wording, and I don't disagree with Patty on that, though I do think that it's important that we identify who we are in our charter as a city. And I don't necessarily think that that means we're following anybody else's lead other than our own. And I would like to see that at least be presented to City Council for them to make that decision on it, personally.
But when you say we don't have to be like everybody else, but the preamble did come from examples from the Portland's and the National Civic League's preambles. Lewiston didn't have one before, and I think we were fine without it. But adding that wokeism language in there, I'm just completely opposed to it. And to me, that is a partisan issue.
Why do we do this? Since that's separate from the public comment, we can come back to that as we go on, but let's hold that discussion for now and stick with the public comment. Like I was saying, I don't know that there's any way we can do anything more in the charter to eliminate partisanship entering into the discussion. You know, I mean, basically we have nonpartisan elections, we have professional management. That's about as far as I can come up with, because it's certainly, I don't know how you would even try to write something that would keep people from expressing their partisan opinions. Or quite honestly, at some level, do I think that you should? Because there clearly can be differences of opinion. If you want to label them partisan, they're partisan. If they're not, if you don't want to label them that, they're differences of opinion.
Yeah, question?
Yes, Roger.
Am I looking, I don't see those terms in the preamble here.
The discrimination they're prohibited, come on, based on.
I sent out a new version today.
Oh,
too.
that's right. Okay, I'm sorry. I must be looking at the old one. You're right. I'm sorry. Yep.
And it was in the old one too, because
Well, I see gender in the old one. I just don't see gender identity.
Not gender identity or expression.
oh, okay, that's my fault. I put those in there because I was pulling that out of the city's existing policies.
Oh, now I see that. Yeah.
So that language is in the city's personnel rules and regulations.
Right. Okay. I do see it now. I apologize.
Exactly as it is written.
That's the way it's written.
Exactly
in the
as
city's
it is
rules.
written.
Yep. I mean, it doesn't have to be that way in the charter. We can certainly take out some of those ones that people might have concerns about.
I just think it's redundant. Gender's gender. However you look at it.
Everybody okay with just taking it back to gender and leaving out some of the other stuff?
Well, if I just understood you correctly, Ed, what you have here, gender identity or expression, you took out of the city's, where did you find that again in the current
The
policy?
city-
Where?
The city's personnel rules and regulations.
Personnel rules and regulations. Okay, yeah.
But I think that's different than having it in the charter too.
I agree.
So I can certainly do those editings. Let me take another shot at the preamble. I think there's a couple things that I would like to see in a preamble. One is the notion that we're doing as charters because we want to govern ourselves. Another is I think that we want the government to be focused on the common good and try to do the right things for the entire community. So let me take the shot at giving another version to send around. Another thing that came up in the public comments was one person felt that there should be a requirement that that a code of ethics should either be required in the charter, or the charter should require the council to adopt a code of ethics. Some cities have ordinances that govern provide a code of ethics. Other folks have less formal things. The only thing that we have is the prohibition against self-dealing that's in the charter now in terms of conflicts of interest. It's not very detailed, but that's what's there now. Any thoughts on that? I guess my thought is not to put it in the charter. It's something the council could do if it felt it needed to.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
Linda?
I don't see that. I don't see the need rising to a charter level.
I was going to say the same thing. I don't see a need for that to be in the charter. I think that like the school committee adopts a code of ethics. So I think that the city council can do that as well.
Okay. Another person suggested, and this is something the council's been talking about, suggested that a proof of residency be included in the charter for candidates for office, that they would have to certify that they were from the ward or the position they're running for. Council's working on an ordinance to that effect, Dennis?
Couldn't get to the unmute fast enough. That's exactly what I was going to mention is the council took that up on June 1st. We did the workshop. It appears the council's asked me to have that on for action on the June 15th. And that's basically just a residency affidavit. As you said, that would go and when someone turns in their paperwork to run for office and they submit at that time, they would be required to just sign that affidavit stating what ward they live in, and that if they were to, and I can send this to the entire committee just so you can see what's exactly being acted on. But basically that they live there in this ward, and that if they move, they're to notify the clerk, the city clerk, within a certain amount of time, and that's basically it. That they'll abide by that. So that's something that I expect the council at least take action on June 15th. And I think the question, I was just looking at my notes. There was 2 items that the council's recently asked the Charter Review Committee for me to pass on to the Charter Review Committee. Is one, to review that affidavit. And we can certainly, again, send that out and just get some comments back. I think the biggest question was whether or not they, and this may be a legal opinion, whether or not it fits to be added in the charter, the affidavit, or just to leave it separate. And I think we looked at it as an ordinance, and the argument was made just by the city clerk. If you put it in the charter, we've got to wait and have a full election to make a change. If there's any need to change that affidavit for any reason or whatnot, by putting it in ordinance and attaching it to the ordinance already there, it's at least able to be amended or corrected if there is an issue or language needs to be updated fairly easily.
Yeah, I would think, obviously we don't want to put a form in the charter, but I think we could put a statement in the charter requiring that a candidate for office provide proof of residency and annually certify or notify the city clerk if they change their residence out of the ward or district from which they're elected.
Mm-hmm.
I think that might make some sense, because then it would be in the charter and couldn't easily be changed. And I know that's been an issue on a number of occasions in the last few years about whether somebody does or doesn't live where they're supposed to be living to be in office. Yes, Linda.
So would this be added to the areas where it says specifically about forfeiture of office, where it says moves from ward in which they are elected? we would probably, or what are we thinking on where that would go?
Part of it would go in the election section, along with at the time they filed their nomination papers, they would have to file a statement of residency. And it could also probably put the change of residence requirement in there as well.
Okay.
The other thing that plays into the concern here is what we're trying to do in the charter in terms of an enforcement mechanism. I mean, right now, as people know, if somebody says, well, so-and-so doesn't live where they say they live,
Right.
it kind of ends there because it becomes basically, nobody wants to touch it because it's a hot potato politically.
Mhm.
And there's no formal mechanism for determining what the situation is. So we've written in, or at least I've written into the draft, that there is a procedure now where the council would be able to, the council would be able to evaluate whether people had forfeited their office or not, or if they had behaved in other ways that justified their removal from office. And we'll get to that when we get into the language, but that also plays into that whole issue. There was also the other thing I saw that we had talked about is there was one citizen suggested that there ought to be a residency requirement for city employees, either that they reside in the city or they own property in the city. There are a number of immediate problems with that. Number one, under state law, we can't require residency to be a city employee. And number two, we have all these union agreements, some of which do, and I think only police and fire deal with residency, and that's on a recall distance so that they can get back into the city if there's an emergency. So I don't think we could legally do that. That's what it comes down to. Linda.
A question on that. Isn't there something in here that states specifically about the city clerk needing to be a resident, but has to have permission from the city council if they do not live in the city of Lewiston? I don't know if that was an ordinance or in the charter.
It's in the charter for two positions, the city administrator and the school superintendent. City administrator would have to have approval from the council not to live in the city. And the school administrator would have to have approval from the school committee.
Okay.
Otherwise, they're required to live in the community.
I have to say that I've heard a lot of comments on that from a lot of people about concerns, not necessarily written language in the charter, but concerns from people in the community that we have department heads that don't live in the city, and that, well, what is the buy-in? Not to be disrespectful to any department head, because I have a lot of great respect for who we have working for our city, but that if they don't live here, what is their, they work here and then they leave the city, they don't see what's actually happening. And so I don't know, maybe something we need to think about.
Well, there's a couple possibilities, and what some of the employment agreements that the city has entered into has language in there that either requires that they live in the city. That's usually something that was done for somebody who was going to have to move anyway. In other words, they were from so far away that they couldn't commute, so they were going to have to move. If they were going to move, they had to live in the city. The alternate language for people who already live in the area is that have been in those agreements is, should they ever sell their current primary residence, they would have to relocate into the city. The reason for that is, a couple of reasons for that. One is that a lot of qualified people who may live in the area but would be unwilling to sell their property and move. So they just would never be eligible or be willing to be employed by the city. So we would be cutting off a supply of relatively local individuals. Secondly, I think it's asking a lot of someone. If you've lived someplace, say you've been a Lewiston resident like Dennis was, and you were working for the city of Auburn, and they were saying you've got to sell your property and move into Auburn. If I was Dennis, I'd say, fine, you're gonna have to pay me to do that.
Right.
Because of you're relocating family, it's a disaster area. some position, it makes sense. I agree, that should be the goal wherever possible. But I think you're really limiting your ability to attract people if you say you have to move.
Okay.
And if I could just add one point that does come up pretty common when that conversation, I think we always strive for that. And I know Ed, would agree that we always strive. Anytime we're hiring a director, that's usually where we start. We'd like you to live in the city, or go. If they've got a spouse and that spouse has got a job, and this happens a lot, the job is in Portland, the job is, somewhere else, and they're living in, somewhere in between, trying to make that commute work, for both, people in the home. So I think it's just stuff like that. I think there's a lot of that type of thing. And I think it really restricts the pool, as Ed said. I think it does. And we've run into that. And I guess in today's world, it's pretty hard as it is, from a recruiting standpoint. I think every industry, every business, everyone's feeling that. So I just bring that point up, that it does restrict it. But.
So, I think trying to continue to urge people to live in town, trying to put it in the contract where it's appropriate. If they have to relocate, they ought to move into Lewiston.
Mm-hmm.
If they've got an existing property and they sell it, they should be relocating into Lewiston. I think that works as a pretty good compromise, or at least an effort to address the problem.
Okay.
One other thing that came up in the comments was, how do we force the city to apply with the public records open meetings law? And some of that had to do with some concern over a Facebook page of one council member. That actually come up a couple of times about Facebook, and there is a distinction that gets made in the law between a personal Facebook page, which is largely about your personal stuff, and a political or position-oriented Facebook page, which is largely about your position as a city councilor or a state representative or whatever. That gets very difficult and judgmental. There are ways that people can take complaints. They can complain to the state attorney general's office. They have, I think, still a designated person in their office who is an ombudsman to deal with issues like that. Or they can go to the district attorney and ask that he bring charges or investigate. So there are ways to do it. I don't think there's anything we can necessarily do in the charter. It's a state law issue. So I don't know if anybody has any suggestions, comments, or ideas about that. Want to wait and see if Patty's coming back? I think the system finally caught up with her signing off about a half an hour ago.
Here we go.
There she is. All right. Welcome back, Patty. We're waiting for you.
I was listening as I walked away. But...
Oh, well, that's good. Anything else that people saw in the public comment that we should, I think most everything else I saw was addressed.
I think so.
I mean, obviously there were differences of opinion. Some people thought the mayor should vote. Some people thought the mayor shouldn't vote. Some people thought the mayor should have appointment powers. Some people thought it shouldn't, but we've talked about all of those issues. So I don't think there was anything else that we hadn't talked about that I saw in all of those comments.
I agree.
One thing that, yep, Patty.
I was just going to say a question on, I didn't think we had decided as a group that we were changing the charter to add two more. Is it two more at-large city councilors?
That was to go get to the 9 people to have 3 up each year.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
A couple of things. One thing that got missed. This was a council question that we didn't address directly. We had a council member who brought up the issue of what happens when a council member moves out of a ward, particularly younger councilors who rent. That's partially addressed in our proposal by providing for a couple of at-large positions.
Mhm.
So if somebody was concerned that they might have to move out of a ward, they could run for an at-large position, and then all they have to do is stay within the city. Other than that, I think it's awfully hard to say you've been elected from a ward and you're allowed to continue to serve even if you don't live in that ward.
Mm.
I mean, the only thing I could think of is if it was within the last year of a person's term, allowing them to serve the term out. Because right now, if someone resigns with less than a year left in their term, the council gets to appoint someone. So that would eliminate the council appointment stuff, which has some issues associated with it. And just would allow the person to serve out one more year. Throw that out there for comments, suggestions, reactions.
I like that myself because, you know, especially as you say with renters, a lot of the younger folks who might be inclined to run for the council, having to move is not an uncommon occurrence. And if they're still in the city, and I don't think we have a whole lot of parochialism among our ward councilors anyway. If they have less than a year left, I think they should be allowed to complete their term, not run again outside of the ward, but to complete their term. I find that eminently reasonable.
Other reactions?
I would agree with that, a year or less, to go through the process of, like you said, either appointing someone or anything. Just doesn't make sense for that amount of time. And given the fact that, especially if we are looking at a 3-year term, that's on the one hand, not all that long, but things can happen and impact someone's life and what they're doing, where they're at in their situation in those 3 years that they had no way of planning on that could dictate.
Yeah.
So I think keeping it within, if it's within that last year, they just finish out their term, makes sense.
Okay,
I think it goes without saying in this group, but just because this is being recorded, as long as they move within Lewiston, right? Not
Yes.
anywhere else out of
Yeah.
state.
Oh, yes. Agreed.
We've had folks, even snowbirds in the past, going to Florida for 6 months out of the year, things like that. We should allow the mayor to appoint somebody or something like that.
I would agree with that.
Absolutely.
Anything else on public comment stuff? Okay, I did send out a marked up version of the charter. I noticed that I missed one today when I was looking back through it. I missed one thing. I did not include in the changes the suggestion we were making that if you're on the Board of Appeals, you would be ineligible to serve on other city committees. I will build that into the next version, so I'll cover it there. Do you want to start going through the charter and hit at least the big changes to see where we are on some of this stuff?
I think so.
Sure.
Okay, the biggest changes all relate to the staggered 3-year terms for council. Going with that means you have elections every year. It was surprising to me as I went through the charter how many things had to change. Because a lot of it was little stuff. The president of the charter the president of council goes from a 2-year term to a 1-year term. Obviously, we do the same thing for the school committee. And there are just lots of minor little changes throughout the charter. But the idea again would be that to get to the 3-year terms, we would go to a 9-member council by adding 2 at-large councilors. The mayor would retain basically the same situation he has now, which is that he would be able to vote to break ties or when somebody else is absent or not voting for a conflict of interest. He would retain appointment powers that are specified in the charter now with one exception, and that is the council would confirm the appointments to the planning board. So that's pretty much the biggest single change. I did ask Marty whether a simple change to staggered terms for, everybody having an election each year, just changing one simple thing, go from an election every 2 years to an election every year with split council members and positions up each year. He even felt that would require a charter revision and a charter commission. So if we support that proposal, tomorrow night, one of the things that I obviously will be telling the council is that if they want to have staggered terms, they will have to go through the process of setting up a charter commission. So we all okay with that?
I am.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I would just, if I could, and I know I said this before, I like the idea of staggered terms. And the arguments in favor of staggered terms are persuasive. I just don't like the the way we get there. I don't like a 3-year term. I think a 2-year term is just right for council. I think we may be able to attract fewer potential candidates if they have to run for a 3-year term as opposed to a 2-year term. Might be too long a commitment for some. Secondly, I really don't like the idea of municipal elections every year. I think every 2 years for municipal elections is also just about right. So as much as I like the idea of staggered terms, I just couldn't be in favor of how we get there, at least as currently constructed. It doesn't necessarily, I also like the idea of the at-large councilors. You could still have at-large councilors. I think the probability of extensive turnover would be somewhat diminished with the addition of 2 at-large councilors. The chances of 7, 8, or 9 all not running for re-election every 2 years, I think, would be very small, especially with the at-large councilors, those committed to running citywide for a council seat, I think are probably going to hang in there for a little bit. So that's just my take on it, and I really struggled with this one.
I'm in agreement with Roger.
The difficulty
The
is
3-year terms are tough to think about.
yeah. Well, if you want 2-year terms and staggered council terms, but you don't want an election each year, you're out of luck.
I understand, but
I
weighing
will
the
also-
relative merits of the two,
Right.
I would stick with the non-staggered. Yeah.
The point I will point out to everyone that if there is a charter commission, they're not necessarily going to go with this option.
Right.
They could pick any of the options that we outlined in that memo I sent around about structural options. So they could go with election every year with 7 members. They could go for an election every year with 9 members. They could go
Right.
4-year terms with elections every 2 years. I mean, there's all kinds of options here that can be put in. I will reiterate again that I think having everybody up for election at the same time is a problem. It's a problem in terms of consistency between council years. It's a problem in terms of stability of administration. It's just not from my point of view, it's a real negative in terms of selling the community to other professionals in the local government business you might want to attract as department heads or as managers. So what I will tell the council tomorrow is that we generally support staggered terms, but with a couple of potential not so sures. And if they want to pursue it, they should go forward with a charter commission.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I will point out, as I recall, the statistics are that over 85% of all municipalities have staggered terms of office.
Yeah. But how many of them have elections every year?
In our case, Portland and Bangor both do.
Yep.
I will just reiterate what Ed said. Then the reason why we're talking about this is because we've discovered that it is currently an issue. It is a problem. And that's why we're bringing it up. We're just presenting this information to the council and then eventually the commission to make changes. So, and then eventually it'll be up to the voters, but that's what we're doing here.
Yeah.
We're trying to solve a problem.
Okay, so that's big one, number one, big one, semi-big ones, number two. We've talked before about the confusion about what the mayor's appointment authority is in terms of ad hoc committees. I spent some time talking to Marty, and he is of the opinion that charter says that the mayor appoints all ad hoc committees, so it doesn't make any difference who creates them. Whether it's the council or the mayor that creates them, the mayor gets to appoint them. So to try to clarify that, I would put some language in indicating that the mayor appoints all ad hoc, that while the council or the mayor can create a committee, the mayor makes all of the appointments. But added some language in there suggesting or saying that the mayor should consult with the councilors on those appointments. So it leaves the power with the mayor, but it does put a little bit of a requirement on the mayor that he communicate his intentions to the council and take feedback from them before he makes the appointments. Yes, Linda.
So would that be him communicating or her communicating with the council prior, I mean, via email or something that had to be a public meeting so that it was seen to be discussed publicly?
I think it could be something where he could just send an email out to people saying, these are some of the people I'm thinking about appointing.
Okay,
Or have individual conversations with council members
okay,
before going forward with the appointment.
okay.
Ed,
It does.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Oh, the first word in that paragraph is misspelled, I believe. The one in red. And
Let me get it up. Hang on a second. Now I can't see you all because I'm looking at the charter. That was section 2.03. Let's see. Ad hoc advisory committees may be created by the mayor or the city council. Oh, I see. And yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Got it. That's an easy one. I can fix that real quick.
Yeah.
Let me get this out of my way so I can see again. So anyway, let's see. It actually says later that the mayor will have the sole authority to appoint the members of such committees after consulting with and offering the councilors an opportunity to comment on proposed appointments. So theoretically, he could do something as simple as sending out an email saying, hey, I'm getting ready to appoint this committee. You have some suggestions as to who you think might be good to be members. But it just opens the door a little bit to participation, but leaves the authority in the mayor to make the actual appointments. Thoughts on that approach?
I'm good with that. Yep.
So am I.
Fine with it. That makes sense.
Okay.
I see it could cause some problems. I mean, I don't know. If I was mayor, I would check with everybody or, kind of throw the names out that I'm thinking about. But if you get a lot of pushback, I don't know, could impede the process or not, but 6 1/2 dozen of the other.
Yeah, I mean, anyway, the way it works now, if the mayor doesn't consult with the council, that creates hard feelings too.
Right.
Okay. The next thing we did was we went back to the moral turpitude language,
Mhm.
which basically says that you forfeit your office if you're convicted of a crime or offense involving moral turpitude while in office. So that changes in a number of places in the charter for the council, for the school committee, for planning board, board of appeals, and finance committee. The bigger change probably is that we now put in some enforcement language. Section 2.08 that the city council shall be the judge of the election and qualification of its members, including the mayor, and of the grounds for removal from or forfeiture of their office. The procedure would be that they could actually investigate it. And I put a subpoena power in there because that was what was in the National League of Cities charter. And we'll have to check and make sure that that's legal in Maine for them to have subpoena power to do investigations. There would have to be a public, what I'm thinking about here is a situation where somebody's forfeited their office and refuses to leave. Or somebody's been convicted or accused of some significant moral turpitude offense and refuses to resign. There would now be a mechanism for the council to hold that person accountable, call a public hearing, and on a 2/3 vote, six votes of the council to remove the person from office. I think that might solve some of the problems and issues we've had in the past, that there's at least a mechanism now. In the past, it's often been, well, what are you going to do? Well, we don't know what to do. No, there's nothing in the charter that says how you deal with these situations. So this would allow it. Comments on that?
I like the language, and I was happy to see that it was at least 6 members of the council had to vote on it for it to move forward.
Yeah, I think that's important so that it's not just a whim of a part of the council, that it takes a supermajority to do something. Yeah. Okay. Section 4.02, we eliminated the reference to the personnel ordinance because we don't have one. We put in the language requiring the council to review the city attorney at least once every 10 years. We limited the planning board and board of appeals to 3-year terms. Included the language there about removal from office as well. With the mayor's appointees, the removal process starts with the mayor. So the mayor would have to refer someone to the council to be forfeit their office or to be removed. That way you can't have a council coup going on. So the mayor retains control over that. It's only if he's concerned, because there is appointees, that the process would start. School committee, we'd also go to the 3-year staggered terms there, but we would not change the number of school committee members. We add the language in for the school committee to be a judge of their own qualifications of their members. We have all the changes in there about the budget to adapt to the school budget process under state law. I sent those out separately a while ago, and I just included them in this draft.
Yeah.
The language on what happens when the council doesn't adopt a budget, I've simplified that. Number one, it's no longer would no longer be the responsibility of the city administrator to meet with the school committee, because there is no way outside of the rules of state law to adopt a school budget. So if the council fails to adopt a school budget, there's no way to make them. Under state law, it's a required part of the process and there's no way around it. But on the city side, the administrator would have to come back with what I'll call a final and best proposal to the council, present it to the council within a period of time. The council, if they did not adopt it by the end of, I'm afraid if it's May or June, by the end of a specified period, that last best and final budget would go into effect. In some places, I've seen the charter provision is that the manager's initially proposed budget goes into effect. But that's not a good idea, I don't think, because between the time the budget process starts and you get toward the end, lots of changes have been made and agreed to, and you're moving towards some kind of a consensus. It would make any sense to go back to the starting point. Plus the budget would be a lot higher at that point. So it just simplifies that process. I don't think it's something that's likely to come into play or be used. But charters need a safety valve if there's no budget adopted.
Okay.
Hey, Ed, sorry. I
Yes,
have my, hey, I was reading something under section 502, Judge of Qualifications, and please, Linda, you could probably help me here. In regards to the school committee, that section, I don't know if everybody's there yet, but it says, okay, so this is for the city council to remove somebody on the school committee. Am I reading that correctly?
I think that's only, if I remember, that is only for the, let me look here, hang on.
Excluding the member appointed by the mayor.
The council should be, word council shouldn't be in there. The school committee shall be the judge of the election and qualification of its members. I think I copied this from the council section and just didn't take the
Okay.
word council out.
Because I was getting a little nervous there, because yeah, that could create big tension between city council
You
and.
think?
Yeah,
Yes. And the member appointed by the mayor, that would fall under the removal process for the council.
Also,
okay.
newspaper, can we change it from newspaper to like just media or something broad? Because we don't know how long newspapers will, I mean, I want to continue newspapers, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, I can include in there what we have in some of the other places, which is or via electronic means.
Mhm.
Yeah,
We can put that in there. So that gets repeated for various boards and commissions in slightly different formats depending on the board or commission.
Okay.
The GNP-IPD, what I'm proposing there, having thought about it some, is to, instead of using the GNP-IPD as a spending limit, to change it to the Consumer Price Index Urban Northeast and apply it to the tax levy. The tax levy is the amount of money that's raised from tax. That's basically the basis for the tax rate. And it strikes me that that is really much more what people are concerned about than overall spending, given that you never can be quite sure what's going to happen with state funding, for example.
Right.
So that's an alternative that I came up with. I'm open to other suggestions. I think given the long history of having some kind of a limitation in the city charter, that we ought to stick with some kind of a limitation. The GNP-IPD to me doesn't make any sense because A, nobody knows what it is. I mean, it's this mystery thing. It says in the charter you're supposed to use the number from the prior September or something like that. Sometimes that number isn't available at the time the budget's adopted. And then we found out later after we've adopted the budget that they go back and adjust the numbers.
Yeah.
So
Lovely.
sometimes it just doesn't seem to work very well. You have to dig around to find it too, because it's put out by the St. Louis Federal Reserve.
Really?
So I thought this might be a simpler, more direct approach that people would understand. If you want to spend more than the increase, if you want to raise the tax levy more than the increase in the consumer price index for our region, you need 5 votes. Sound reasonable?
Yes.
Okay. Under the Finance Committee, there is no more pension board needed. I take it. I've never heard back from Heather. Dennis,
Excuse me, Ed, I'm sorry to interrupt. 5 votes, or would it be 6 votes with a 9-member council?
Oh, yeah, you're right. It would be 6 votes. Yes, you're right. I'll have to change that.
Good catch, Roger.
Yeah,
That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here.
it gets a little complicated sometimes because these little things have to be changed throughout the
Oh.
charter.
I think
So
you've done a
thank
great
you.
job picking up on almost all of them. Yeah.
Thank you for that one. That's good. On the finance committee, we're gonna eliminate the pension board. Do we know for sure that there's no more pensioners, Dennis?
I believe you're right that there is no more, but let me confirm that just one last time with Heather. If she didn't reply to you, I just want to make sure, but I believe you're right that there is no more.
Okay.
But
I also asked Marty about the issue of whether the finance committee has any say over the school committee. And he responded to that, I think, in the information that I sent out to you folks.
Mhm.
And I guess my conclusion is it's sometimes better to leave sleeping dogs lie. The legal opinion is that the finance committee doesn't have control over the school committee. It seems to me if we put in that it should have control over the school committee, that's going to start one fight and may not even be legal.
Mm,
And if we put in that it doesn't have control over the school committee, that may lead some people to think they're giving up something that they don't really have. So given the legal opinion, I think we're okay just leaving it as it is and as it functions now.
okay.
Okay. And 8.06, there's a thing in there about protecting employees when a new charter was adopted, probably goes back to Roger's adoption of the initial 68 or 86 or whatever it was charter.
Mhm.
We probably don't need that, so we can take that out.
Right.
Those were the big things that I saw in the charter. There may be other things. Does anybody have anything else, Patty?
Yes. Section 7.07, determination of election results. In C, it states where plurality, except where otherwise provided, elections shall be determined by plurality vote. And then the next section, D, says mayoral runoff election. So I had suggested that we just use the mayoral race should also be by plurality to eliminate runoff elections for mayor. We never really get into more detail about that, but why is a mayoral race by majority and not plurality? And it doesn't really state the difference in here. It says all elections, except where otherwise provided, shall be determined by plurality vote.
Right.
So I would like to recommend that the mayoral race is also by plurality. That way we could strike all of D because there would be no runoff election.
Yeah, Roger gave some of the background on that provision last time. You want to refresh our memory again, Roger, on why that's in there?
Yeah, one of the main reasons we kept it in back in 78, 79 is that there was a sentiment that the proposed new charter that went to vote in 1971, I believe, did not have a provision for a mayoral runoff. And that became controversial and was one of the reasons that it may have been voted down. Of course, we were also coming off the more powerful mayor under the 39 charter. So looking forward, I think there was some sentiment that there really needed to be a runoff to get that majority. At this point, where we're not looking at really increasing the mayor's power much at all, I'm inclined to agree with Patty. I mean, we elect our governor with the plurality vote. I don't see where we really need a runoff for mayor. The other thing is that, I think there've been a few times where we've had like 3 candidates for mayor and it was fairly close between 2 of them. And you had, an also ran third candidate who got just enough votes to spoil it, to keep somebody from getting the majority.
Right.
And then you have to have a
And one with
runoff.
most votes wins. Period.
Yeah. I think you can make a stronger argument for the runoff when you're talking about a governor or a powerful mayor or something like that. But for the mayor of Lewiston, I don't know that it's necessary.
Yeah, see-
I don't feel terribly strongly about it, but I kind of lean toward that.
I would be a little bit more comfortable with that if it wasn't for the fact that there's no mechanism to easily limit the number of candidates that we could have for mayor.
Mhm.
If you have a.
Is there a
plurality
limit now?
system- No,
No,
no. All you had to do is get 100 signatures.
Yeah.
It's
I
100.
mean, what was the
whatever
most
it is.
votes wins? People show up for elections. If you want your candidate to
So we
win, you
have-
show up.
So we have 5 people sign up for election and and the mayor gets selected with 28% of the vote. I think that would be very difficult going in. I kind of believe that you need 5 votes on the council. If you have 9 members to pass something, you ought to have a majority to be elected mayor. I think it gives the position more standing than it would have as a plurality. And I think in the past, I can think of, I know for sure one case where the results changed between the initial election where the plurality winner did not get a majority in the case later, and that was when Bob got elected over Ben Chin. So I kind of, I don't like having an extra election in December. That's a terrible time if you were to ask people to go out and vote.
Mhm.
There is a way around that I know everybody doesn't agree with, and that's to go to instant runoff voting, which I don't think is timely because of the cost.
right,
I
right.
know other people don't like it at all. So I just as soon stay with the same system. I think we would be asking for trouble where we could get 4 or 5 people running for mayor, in part because they know it's a plurality system
Mhm.
and they might squeak in.
So perhaps the charter then needs to be changed to state. It says, except where otherwise provided, election shall be determined by plurality vote. So where is it otherwise provided?
Right there in the section on the mayor where it specifies that there has to be a runoff election. That is the otherwise
No
provided.
person receive a majority of all votes. Okay. Okay.
Okay. On Marty's legal opinion, we also asked him the question about voter identification at the time of voting, and I see he sent back and said that under state law, he did not think we could do that. So
He did
that's
not
been
think we
answered.
could.
He said we couldn't. I always use think when it was his opinion.
So we
It's
could.
his opinion that we couldn't. So what else do we need to talk about?
Hmm.
I have a question in regards to compensation 2.02.
Yep.
So the information for current compensation isn't listed here. So where is it listed?
It is adopted by ordinance. And is it in the code of ordinances or is it just something that Kathy has?
I think it's just something that Kathy has. I'd have to verify that it's in the ordinance. I don't think it is listed. I think it's a record, I guess you could say.
And my theory is tomorrow when we talk to the council, I will make the recommendation to them tomorrow that the committee supports increasing compensation and share with them the $7,000, $3,500 numbers.
Yeah.
But urge them to make that change because that kind of sits in their bailiwick.
Now, we had talked at the last meeting in regards to having it reviewed by, was it city council or, every 10 years during the charter, when the charters reopen.
That's right. We had talked about that. We could certainly include the charter committee reviewing compensation every 10 years and making a recommendation. People want to do that?
I think we should do that too.
Agreed.
I think, yeah, we had agreed to just have it reviewed every 10 years. Or
Okay.
whenever it was open, I guess, because they can reopen it at any, city council can reopen it. But do we want to say
Yeah,
10
the city
years?
council could, the city
Or do we want
council
to say
can,
whenever it's reopened? Yeah,
city council could do it every year if they wanted.
Yeah.
They obviously haven't and unlikely would do that, but I think having some kind of a benchmark in there for review makes sense. Wouldn't restrict them from making a change in between, but it would give at least a period where it's looked at formally.
Yeah.
Anything else people can think of? Oh, Kathy did ask for one other change in the charter. She wanted to move the section now that limits city employees from being on the city council, being in elected office. From where it isn't now, which is under, I think, the council, to put it under elections so that it's clear that it applies to both the city and the school department.
Yeah.
So that someone who's a teacher can't be on the city council. That's
Right.
how it's always been interpreted as it is now. But just the question always comes up because it's not clear because of where it is in the charter.
I think that's a good idea because I mean, somebody that's the department, works in public works department could try to be on the school board, and that's still the same thing, is it not? I mean, there's still an employee of the city, and I think that language needs to be clarified.
What else have I missed so far?
I don't know that you missed anything, but I wanted to ask, when you're presenting to city council tomorrow night, are you going to be presenting some of the ideas that we talked about? Like, I mean, I know Patty's very strongly in support of voter ID and the plurality. And I think it's important that in stuff that we may not have all agreed on, that the city council at least see some of the discussion we had and the things that we talked about outside of just what we have changed in the charter. I think it's important that they hear the conversation that we had all around all of this so that they can know that this was discussed in every way. And the preamble, like, that's been a big thing for me. Patty's not necessarily in agreement with that, but I think that these things should be told to the city council so that they are aware that we did discuss these things and that was talked about, and I don't know.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do. That's obviously what I was to talk about next, is what we do tomorrow night with the city council. So
Okay.
I would be
Thank you,
glad
Linda.
I'd be glad to put anything on the table to the council that they want. I was going to just basically primarily focus on the notion of staggered terms. If they want to go to staggered terms, they're going to have to set up a charter commission. That Dennis and I and the attorney spent a little bit of time today looking at state law to make sure we understood how that was to be done. The way that works is that and help me out here if I'm screwed up, Dennis, that the council would adopt an order calling for a charter commission and would specify the method of selection of the elected members. They have three choices. They can elect the city. They could say you're going to elect 6 charter commission members at large from within the entire city. They could say you're going to elect 7 members, 1 from each ward. Or they could say you're going to elect 8 members, 7 from wards and 1 from at large, to reflect how the council and mayor are elected. In addition to that, state law says that the municipal officers get to appoint 3 members to the commission. So they have to pass that, say how they're going to do it. Then they have to put an item on the ballot asking the public if they would approve a charter revision, a commission to approve a charter revision. Once that's done, then they would appoint the 3 members that they get to appoint. And actually, Marty says it's actually the mayor who gets to appoint them because that's primarily how our city does it. And Then they would have to have an election for the other ones, however they want to elect them. They could either do that at the same election that the question about having a charter commission is on the ballot, or at a subsequent special or regular municipal or state election. So that's the
Wow.
process.
So
And
so when you present to city council tomorrow, that this is just a workshop. They're not making that decision tomorrow, right?
correct.
Okay. And so I just want to make sure I understand that, because that seems a little bit, wow, a lot
Yeah,
to it, right? So the city council would, so when the city council, you have to get a vote by the citizens of the city in order to get a commission going to look at that kind of charter revision. Is that, did I hear that correctly? And at the same time that that's on the ballot to be voted on, they're voting for the members of the committee, or is that after?
they could do it either way. They could either have everything on the same election, vote for the charter commission and elect the members, which of course wouldn't count if the public says no to the charter commission.
Right.
Or they could have the election on the charter commission, and then either at the I would think probably more likely than not at the next June primary, they could elect the members of the charter commission. In the meantime, and it gets really interesting because of how our system works, in the meantime, the current council would appoint the 3 members, or the current mayor would appoint the 3 members, because they have to be appointed within 30 days of the election authorizing the charter commission. And then the other folks would be elected after the council election, where there was a change potentially in the mayor and a number of council members. So it's kind of, it just shows some of the difficulties we have by not having staggered elections.
Right, because we could have a whole new council this November that's deciding next year after the 3 have already been chosen.
You could have a council elected with a council elected that says, no, we don't want anything changed. We like it the way it is. But they're stuck with the charter commission because this current council wanted it. I don't think that would be a big issue for them, but.
Right, but still interesting.
And
Okay.
again, the other thing to keep in mind is once you get a charter commission, they can do whatever they want.
Right.
So they don't have to abide by anything we recommend or any ideas we come up with.
Which is, again, that was why I was reiterating that I think it's important that when we present to city council, we present everything that we've talked about, because that's a public record, that's a public comment at city council with what the work that we've done. And whether if there is a commission and they agree with what we had talked about or do something completely different, they know what we talked about. That's just my opinion.
I will try, if people have specific things that they think I should bring up, either let me know now or drop me an email before tomorrow night. And of course, you're all invited to participate and be there.
I plan on being there. I've got to be there for the parade for the Downtown Lewiston Association board member anyway. So, and that's on the agenda also. So I will be at the meeting tomorrow.
Good. You're all invited. I can use all the help I can get.
I would like the subject of voter ID to be brought up.
Okay.
That's one thing. Yeah.
Ed, I just wanted to say, I think we got the right man to present. You've done a phenomenal job, and I think this entire committee will agree. You've done a phenomenal job at, looking at all sides, contacting the attorneys, and just getting the right people in the right place at the right time. And even if it wasn't the right time, you got in touch with them. So I just want to, upon the board here, just the committee, I should say, thank you for everything you've put together.
Okay.
Here, here.
I agree.
I appreciate that. So tomorrow night we do the council. Then the question becomes, how do we proceed from here? There are still some things that we need to do. I mean, obviously, I would like to put a final version of the marked up charter in front of you folks. And then literally, I would like to go through each change to make sure and where necessary to have a vote so I can record dissenting opinions. So those are also documented. The other thing that the council is going to have to give some thought to in this process is which, if any, of these proposals that really are amendments, minor things, you're not allowed to sign nominating petitions in pencil.
Right.
Which
Right.
ones of those they actually would like to pursue now, or if they just want to wait and send it all to a revision committee and let them do the whole thing, because they could make some of these changes
Now.
outside of the Charter Commission. And I doubt on a lot of them, especially the little ones, that the Charter Commission is going to care. They're going to have bigger fries to fish. But they'll have to decide that too. And at some point, of course, all this has got to go over to Marty for him to review as well,
Right.
because there's some stuff that he's aware of and there's some stuff that he hasn't even seen.
Okay.
So what's our deadline for a final report, Dennis? Do you remember?
I don't, in terms of a final report, if it all comes down to the timing, it would have to be acted on, the council would have to act if we want anything on the ballot this month, right? So I think in terms of a final report,
Well, this month was only for if they wanted to have the Charter Commission election in
Right,
November.
yep, and so I think,
Kathy normally needs what, 60, 90 days for ballot ordering?
I think it's, I want to say 90, feels more right than 60. I think it's 90 days.
So probably end of July.
Mhm.
I know we have a schedule somewhere. I can take a look.
I don't have it right in front of me, but we do.
So I guess what I'm thinking is we try to set up another meeting.
Mhm.
I was going to say late this month or early in July. I mean, July 4th always gets in the way in July.
Yeah.
I have that day off.
Good. Let's meet on July 4th.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Give me a bang.
I'm available the last week of June. I pretty much got that. Let me see here. Hold on a minute. Let me double check with planning. Oh, I couldn't do Monday the 28th. I apologize. But the rest of the
Okay.
week, I'm good.
Well, as I recall, Francis has problems on
Good on the 29th,
Tuesday
Tuesday.
on the 29th. Hang on a minute. Let me look on my calendar.
I am Monday too, but Melinda's not available on Monday.
Okay. I could do the 29th.
Do that.
As could I. Okay, here.
29th. Do you want to go at 5 or you want to stay at 6:30?
Good with 5.
I'm good with 5 too, actually, because I kind of like to get in and get out. Sorry.
Okay, we can do that. Me, I like 6:30 because I get to eat dinner first.
Well, yeah, there's that too. Roger was eating it right here in front of us. I was jealous. I wanted to piece of pizza.
I'll eat anytime, yeah. So 5 o'clock on the
Okay.
29th?
5 o'clock on the 29th.
Okay.
Please take a look through again what I sent out already to
Yeah.
see if there's anything else in there that you catch that's a mistake or needs to be discussed or you don't agree with, so that
Okay.
we can try to start focusing in on anything that we need to be careful about. Okay,
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Hey, Ed, is
Thank
there
you.
anything we can do to help you for tomorrow night besides what you've already said? Like, if we come to the meeting, can we speak with you? Or, I mean, I
Yes,
have a feeling you're
absolutely.
gonna do a great job. And if Linda, you're gonna be there, just say basically what you just said tonight. I think you'll do, you'll support each other and how you go about saying things.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'll be there. I trust Ed's going to do a great job, though. I don't think that I need to say anything, but I will definitely be watching. I'm more curious to see how the city council is going to take this, what they're going to have to say, and where we might have a discussion on that on the 29th meeting a little further. Yeah.
And if I can just say, I mean, anyone that does show up, Ed will be up in the, I call it Hollywood Squares with us on the council. But any of you that want, if you're in the audience, just simply, we'll certainly let the council know. I will try to make note of anybody I see in the audience, also members. But if you at any point just raise your hand, the electronic hand, we would see it and we can certainly just let them know that another committee member wants to speak up. So that's very easy for us to manage. Just want everyone.
Let me ask, I know Linda's going to be there. Who else is going to attend that meeting? Anyone else?
I may be able to.
And I
What
may
time?
also.
What time is it at?
It starts at
workshop
6 and it'll be
starts at
pretty
6.
early in the agenda.
I'll do my best.
And this
Okay.
is Zoom.
Workshop. Whoops, sorry.
Is it Zoom or in person? Zoom meeting.
It's Zoom.
Zoom.
All Zoom. Okay.
And it's just workshops tomorrow, right, Dennis? That's all that's on the agenda?
Yeah, well, we do
Well,
have a
you have an
short,
executive session, but I mean, you do, right?
well, we have a special meeting just on that, the Downtown Lewiston Association funding for the parade. So, but that's short, that'll literally take
Right.
10 minutes if that. So
Yeah.
they'll get through that and then we'll jump right into the workshop.
And the meeting starts at,
6 p.m.
6.
Okay.
Everybody froze on my machine.
Oh, yeah, your picture's frozen too, Ed.
Oh, here we go. Now
Yeah.
it came back. So it's at 6 o'clock. And I think part of what will be, I'll obviously try to hit some of the big things. I'm not going to get into all the details. I think we'll probably also spend some time talking to them about how the process works from this point, if they want to go with a charter commission,
Mhm.
because I'm not sure that they've spent much time talking about that. Have they, Dennis?
They really haven't. So I think this will be their real time to possibly have their first real discussion around that. So I think you're good for
And
that.
so maybe we ought to have just a quick discussion. What are people's thoughts on them having both the question of setting up a charter commission and electing the charter commission members at the same election in November, along with everything else? I'm a little concerned that that's kind of rushing stuff
Yeah, me too.
and may not be giving people who may be interested in serving on that enough time to think about doing it and enough attention.
I would kind of concur with that also. I think that, if you're going to vote for having to go to the direction of having a commission, we should do that. And I don't think they should both be on the same ballot. Because again, what if it gets voted down that the community doesn't want to go to that? Then those people have, look at Portland. They're spending money in Portland for their charter commission. These people are campaigning like they're running for city council. And, I don't know. I would be concerned about that.
Yeah, I don't think we'd have the same problem. I would hope we don't have the same problem Portland
Me
has.
too.
But there are some costs associated with this. One of the things that
Mhm.
happens is that at 9 months in, the Charter Commission has to give like kind of a preliminary report and write up the version of the charter at that point, and that has to be printed and made available to every voter in the city or something like that.
Oh,
So there are some costs associated with it.
yeah,
It could be somewhat expensive.
right.
I have to
Okay.
go back and refresh my memory on exactly what that said, but there's some requirement to provide information to the public part of the way through the process.
Okay.
Okay, we're coming up on 8 minutes to the deadline. Anything else we need to talk about?
No.
I will reach out to Steve to make sure that he is up to date and has the same opportunity to be there tomorrow night and to raise issues as you all have, and see if he has anything else on his mind that we need to put on our list.
I hope you're not going to reach out to him tonight in Fenway.
No, I'm sure he's sitting there watching all of this on his cell
Sure.
phone. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. Okay, with that, if there's nothing else, we will be adjourned.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Good
Good
night.
night. See some of you
Bye.
tomorrow.
Okay.